Welcome back, everyone, to the Men on a Mission podcast. I'm your host, Brad Richard, and shortly we will be starting our next episode. We will be providing you tools, resources, and information that you can use to make your life just a little bit better. But before we do that, let's honor our country, and then we'll begin the podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to the Men on a Mission podcast. I'm your host, Brad Richard, and tonight is episode 54, 54, almost as old as I am. We have a special guest with us tonight, Shaun Coffey. He is an author, speaker, trauma survivor, addiction and recovery individual, and a mental health advocate. Shaun is someone who wants to utilize his experiences in hopes that they help others and inspire people to take their lives back. He is certified recovery support worker in New Hampshire. Every time I hear New Hampshire, I think of Bill Murray in What About Bob? New Hampshire. And anyway, recovery coach, academy graduate. He is a author of the book, or a co-author of the book, Boys Do Cry, and he is also a public speaker. Active addiction and long-term recovery experience of 26 years, 15 years experience in chronic homelessness. That'll be an interesting part of his story. And childhood trauma and adverse experience survivor, mental health awareness advocate, and brain disorder. And he had a brain disorder of the corpus callosum, and callosum. There you go. And he had to help me out with that word. So, with no further ado, welcome to the Men on a Mission podcast, Shaun Coffey. Nice to have you on, Shaun.
Thank you.
You bet. It's great to have you on. We've been kind of going back and forth. I know we had some scheduling things, but that's just life. But yeah, well, I'm glad that you're on, and you are episode 54. And I think, the listeners, the veterans and their family members, I think will get a lot from your story. It is a dramatic story, and the turnaround is, in my opinion, miraculous. So I think there's a lot of vets out there, especially right now, that could really use some inspiration and kind of share in your strength. So if you could start off our first segment and tell the listeners a little bit about your story, and then towards the end of that, if you could tell us a little bit about the book Boys Do Cry, and kind of bring that back and tie it into to your story. And I'm going to bow out from the mic, and I'm going to turn it over to you. And I want to hear your story as well. So take it away and go for it.
I grew up in New England. I was born in Washington State, and we kind of transplanted. My parents were divorced when I was 2. I think we stayed in that area until I was around 5. And then my dad and I moved to New England, where he had family. he was diagnosed schizoaffective, which is a combination of bipolar and schizophrenia. He had he was manic depressive, and he had singular bipolar by itself. And this was back when they used to kind of different things, and now it's kind of lumpy, I guess you'd like all lumped in. So from probably around when we moved here and around maybe 6 or 7, that's pretty much when the abuse, I'm going to say, like, as far back as I can remember, maybe a lot of it was physical. At being younger, a lot of it was emotional, just because the physical aspect, I'm little at that point, but as I got older, and he expected more out of me, or me trying to navigate life and not doing it his way. That's pretty much when it got to a point where it started to get physical. So I lived with that from, like I said, maybe remembering 6 or 7 all the way to 16. A lot of that was emotional, mental, and physical abuse. There's numerous, I guess without getting into specific and for time's sake, there was just numerous times where I was on, the floor or somewhere, just looking at somebody who says they love you, and at the same time, they're doing these things. So at a young age, my mind was all jacked up to begin with. My family was military, police, and hospital. So you kind of grew up in that environment, and you had a choice. My dad didn't really be against me not going in the military. It wasn't like something that he wanted to do, but he had suggested it. And through all that stuff, even though there was a barrier between our relationship and the abuse and stuff like that, there's obviously still love there, because he is your parent at the end of the day. And so I go to the Air Force recruiter's office, and my dad was in the Air Force as well. So I go to the Air Force recruiter's office, and I show up, and there's a little clock on the door with the dials, and it says, like, we'll be back at 1, out to lunch. I get to the stairwell, and I hear the creak of this door, and it opens up, and it's a Marine Corps guy, sticks his head out. He's like, "Hey, where are you going?" And I'm like, I had a meeting with the Air Force, and I'm gonna go wait. He goes, "You want to be a man, or do you want to be a pussy?" And I was like, "Let's talk." So I literally ended up sitting in the Marine Corps recruiter's office for about a week, and that was it. My dad was so angry because he just was Air Force. Everything was, Air Force, and that's what I should have done. And hindsight 2020, and I guess after these 2 segments, you guys, maybe you might think the same, but in retrospect, I wouldn't have learned the things that I did, I guess, if I didn't have these things happen. So I get into boot camp. I was a senior speaker, so they wouldn't let me not go to graduation. I was gonna just get my diploma later and go before graduation. So 3 days after I graduated, I'm on a plane to get into, the recruit depot, and they tell you that you're going to be treated with the respect of a Marine and all this stuff. And mind you, the biggest part of the story is that I had so much of, if you could look at a drill instructor and you could look at my father, there, in that the only difference is that a drill instructor, at this time, couldn't put their hands on you. So often there was that disconnect for me where I'm sitting there trying to be, disciplined, but at the same time being, I guess, triggered by all the yelling and different. So at some certain points, I tuned it out, and I was called out by drill instructors for stuff. And I'm just like, is this a joke? And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, because you can't hit me. I come from this environment. But so I get into SOI, which is like a school for the Army. It's 30 days of, if you have a non-infantry MOS, then you go to Marine combat training, which is a dumbed down version of that. So it's 2 weeks instead of 30 days. In that time frame, there was a little bit of hazing going on and some other stuff. And I had already kind of, I think, made up my mind already that this isn't something that I can do long term because of the way that the whole boot camp thing. And then after boot camp, when I'm supposed to be a Marine now, still being treated the same way, and also being 18 years old, I went and took off. I went AWOL, and I came back coincidentally, and kind of hilariously, the day that my platoon graduated. So they thought when I came back, they were kind of like, you think you can just leave and come back on graduation day and you're just good to go? And, so they told me that they were going to give me dishonorable discharge and, all the stuff that goes with that. And, but you're going to get liberty this weekend. And I was like, if you give me liberty after you just told me this stuff, like I'm gonna just go again. So, and again, I'm 18 and hindsight's 2020, I would have retired 3 years ago. So I made the choice to leave again. And the second time I called my dad and I let him kind of know what was going on. And he basically said, like, thank you for talking to me about this, but I can't really have contact with you. That's like, I don't want to say harboring a fugitive, but like, you know what I mean? Like being in contact with me, knowing that that I was absent from the military. He just said you should probably go back. So I actually spent 35 days in a brig in Camp Pendleton, and they let me out. And when I got out and I got my discharge and everything, I had a general under honorable conditions, and I wondered how the hell that happened. Years later, I found out that I found a folder that my dad had eked out, coming down to the Marine Corps' office, different news outlets, some local, government, to try to get the discharge changed. And I don't know that he was successful in doing that, but I was supposed to get a bad conduct and I had a general under honorable. So I can attribute maybe that somewhere along the line my dad helped, and I really don't know how all that happened. That's pretty much the military side of that story. I mean, there's after the military, I mean, my dad passed away. That kind of jacked me up. There is, as you said in the intro, there is a whole bunch of years of addiction, and about right now, 13 years as of July. So, this in 2018, I got the opportunity to do the book. It was really awkward for me to talk about myself, but this was at a time where I had already been in my field of mental health and substance use for a few years. I knew that there was parts of my story that I needed to get out there because there had to be other veterans or other people that were in the same position. So I got the opportunity to do the book, and that was the first time I was really honest with myself, vulnerable, and just kind of an open, no pun, but an open book. Nothing was off, and that kind of went the way that it went. And so she published the book in 2018, and it took off. The homelessness part of this whole thing is that after my dad had passed away, I mean, I left home after I came back from the military. So I left home at like 20 years old, I think, at that point, and I was on my own, and I was rebelling against my dad. So I was like, I'm going to do this on my own. Well, that turned into all those years of homelessness, and that doesn't necessarily mean I was outside or I was living in a tent or something. Like I was like sleeping on couches. There was a bridge in town that I had slept under, and some woods and stuff like that. But for the most part, I couldn't get out of my own way. And, the experiences of my past were kind of paving that future that I was in, I guess you should say. There is a significant substance use, I guess, part of this, in that I had to leave Colorado because, and this is in the book too, and I'm pretty sure we'll drop the link so that people can check it out if they want to, but there was a situation where I had a lot of people looking for me, and I had to leave the place that I was. And that situation is in the book, but this is also the catalyst of how all this came about. So, and even how I ended up in my job, which we'll talk about later too. But I ended up being in a transitional housing environment, and I went out to the smoking hut probably a month after I'd been there, and there was a guy in there, and he was talking about drugs, and he was from Colorado. And as movie-ish as this sounds, he was one of the guys that I was connected to 15 years prior to this incident. And he made some phone calls back to Colorado and basically told the place that we were living at that I should be careful and all this other stuff. Now, they don't screw around with any of that information. So they waited for me to get home from work, had all my stuff packed in the garage, told me to put it in a truck, gave me $400 and said, go, get a hotel for a couple nights and we'll see what we can do. Because of my veteran status, I was able to get into a GPD program, which is grant per diem, and there's a lot of them across the US, and they're all for 2 year, I think most of them are 2 year transitional housing program. Kind of, you live in a place for 2 years, you get rehabilitated, they help you with housing, they help you with finance, do your finances, basically try to rehabilitate you from the state that you're in to a sustainable environment. So I ended up living there for the 2 years. I moved to a different program there, which enabled me to have my daughter. And I started to work for them in substance use environments, on an addiction crisis line that we have in the state, and then also a safe station. Then that's like a place that people can go to. I ended up leaving the job there, and at this current moment, I am a case manager in the same place that I was in as a resident. So there's more on that in the next segment for sure. So this book, it helped me kind of open myself. It helped me kind of be okay with talking about these things, and where most men hold, and especially military men, have this persona in society that we have to be this big macho guy, like we can't show emotion, we can't cry, we can't do any of the things that make us look feminine, or show a side of us that not a lot of people see. So the lady who compiled the book is Michelle Kadanak, and she reached out to 12 guys who have all been in situations such as that, and kind of reframed what it feels like, and what this new, I guess, version of men, where we are able to be vulnerable and able to show these these vulnerabilities to the world, and know that there's how many ever million men out there that feel exactly how we do, but there's not very many of us that'll stand on 2 feet. And so that's basically the premise of the book, and how that all got put together.
What's the last thing that you said again, just to make sure that everyone catches the last part there?
Just that the book helped me, and obviously now is helping others in situations, to be more open with people immediately, in their immediate family or close friends.
Mhm.
I've been able to have conversations with my close friends around these certain situations, and some of them say, yeah, like, I get it. And we'll get them to talk, and not in a abundant, social situation, but in small circles. So it is creating the conversations that we hoped it.
Right. Wow, there is so much to unpack in
Yeah.
that opening, Shaun, from the abuse, by your father, the abuse that continued in your brief stint in the Marine Corps, and then the homelessness and the addiction. And there's so many boxes that you can check off when it comes to been there, done that. Now you are in a place where you are helping other veterans, whether they be Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. You are helping them in that transitional aspect of their lives. And do you think that if you wouldn't have, walked through that muddy river of all that baggage that you went through, do you think you would be in the position you are today, as far as being a servant and giving back to your brothers and sisters in arms?
I'd like to say no, but at the end of the day, none of it all did happen. So it's hard for me to differentiate, but I feel like, I don't think the passion, and I don't think the passion to do the work, and I don't think that there's a certain level of caring that you get when you're a peer to somebody than when you just come in and work for it. And I'm not saying that any type of book smarts or any type of degrees and stuff don't help you, but most people say that they want to work with people that do that have kind of walked in those shoes.
Right.
It
Yeah,
just makes it easier.
that is so important. And why I believe it's so important that all of us as veterans we need to put our story out there. We need to put our pain out there, our struggle, our stuff, and not to say, look at me, look what I've done or look what I've got through. What's your problem? Not that type of mindset, but like you said, when it comes to the military, soldiers, they will open up and they'll talk about almost anything with another soldier, but they're not going to tell a civilian or a spouse or a brother or a sister. They're not going to tell them squat.
Brad, that's where the healing happens, because
Yes,
they're not just talking to another veteran, they're talking to somebody who has been put in their shoes and even lived in the program and can empathize with the situation, but still have that boundary of, I'm here and trying to get you guys in a good place.
in a good place. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
We're coming up on a break, and when we come back, we're going to kind of pick up where we left off in segment 2. Your story is just filled with excuse me, so much inspiration and power and despair and sadness, but there's also a lot of joy and a lot of growing up and maturity that took place within your story. We will have in the show notes your links, a link to where you can buy the book and a link to your website and your social media links. So those will be in the show notes. So, if you're listening to this later, which this is a podcast, so you will be listening to it later, but we will have the links in the show notes so you can, connect with Shaun going forward. But let's go ahead and take our short break. And then when we come back, we'll pick up where we left off. And we have a lot more to cover in the second segment. So stay with me, Shaun, and we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome our new sponsor, Scars and Stripes Coffee Company. They empower veterans to build their own business using their e-commerce platform. When you purchase from Scars and Stripes Coffee, you are buying from a veteran, and your purchase directly impacts the men and women who have served our country. Do more than say, thank you for your service. Order today and empower a veteran. Use vet code Brad Richard at scarsandstripescoffee.com. That's scarsandstripescoffee.com. Hey, welcome back. We are speaking with Shaun Coffey. He is an author, speaker, trauma survivor, addiction and recovery, as well as mental health advocate. His story is amazing. If you didn't hear a little bit about his story, check out the first segment of this episode 54. But we are back with Shaun. And when we went to break, you were talking about the addiction aspect, the homeless aspect, all the things that had happened to you along with the passing of your father. And that led you to a place where you're currently working in a transitional housing, right? And it's the same place that you yourself resided at. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If you want to just take it from there moving forward and because it's like been there, done that, live that, and you actually did, and you actually lived where you're working at now. So that is a whole new twist. So kind of go forward from that point.
I ended up being in this transitional housing, and just as we talked about in the first segment, there's housing and budgeting. There's benefits, mental health, medical, substance use. They have all these different categories that you work with in your case management. And basically the main goal is to find long-term sustainable living situations for homeless veterans that had issues. In this program, I basically learned that in order to make money and live, to adhere to these rules. So it was the first type of a situation where rules applied. And if you guys go back and listen, or you did listen to the first section, you would understand the barrier with authority that I might have had at that point. So that was also an internal struggle. But so I got into this program because obviously I was a veteran. The previous 15 years before this, I knew that I had gotten out of the military with a general under honorable conditions. But what we didn't talk about is that they gave me an RE4, which made sure that I was never able to get back in the military again or upgrade it to a point where I could get a waiver or anything like that. So for hindsight, I spent the better part of all those years trying to get back in. I would talk to the recruiters. I would do all this. Hindsight's 2020. I know that kind of sounds cliche, but there was a wrong there that I felt I needed to right, and throughout the whole in that whole entire period. So I get into this place and they get me up to the VA, and I find out that I'm eligible for services, which which well, not obviously, but it gave me mental health. So I go in and I see some mental health people, and I realize that there's a ton to unpack, but kind of don't latch onto it, I guess. And I was very non-receptive to anything therapy, or it's a person who makes 80 grand, who got spent 8 years in school, who is just going to tell me what the book says, that kind of a mentality, until I sat in there and I just started to learn how, for lack of a better phrase, how like jacked up I was. So basically I get these skills of being able to sustain rent and being able to actually get to a point where I am fully in their program, where I have this voucher. They gave me a VASH voucher, which is Veterans Assisted Subsidized Housing, and that voucher was pretty much like a public housing voucher, but it was through the military. So they assisted me in getting that voucher, and I am currently still on the voucher right now. So, the things that I did get from being chronically homeless and having these experiences basically afforded me these, I guess, kind of fail safes in life. So I still have the voucher, which has a case management component to it. So I'm a case manager at work, and I'm still receiving case management, in my personal life. So it's kind of been that environment where they've fostered kind of this ability for me to see myself outside of kind of outside of the whole situation. So I could see these parts of the program that they were trying to help us with, and really be able to hone in on them singularly and try to work on them. So one thing that I think people need to kind of understand is that basically that when you're in substance use and homelessness, that oftentimes people don't get it right the first time. Sometimes I think average is like 6 or 7 times before they get it. So there's a lot of mistakes and fails and learning, and then successes also. So it's been a pretty crazy journey, but all in all, I'm at a place now where I've been in my field for about 6 years. I've been continued the therapy since 2015, and I've been with current therapists for maybe like 3 years, and he's kind of helped me with the diagnoses of the ADHD, and just some other cues for me to kind of to go off of. So I went back to the mental health team. We did some assessments, and I'm currently medication for the ADHD, and actually made me like a completely different person, in a sense that, and I'll get into this in a second, but the corpus callosum stuff, I feel like the ADHD component of it, the medicine kind of connects these broken pathways, I guess, if you will. So the corpus callosum it connects the left and right hemisphere together. It's the major highway of information from the left side to the right side, and I'm missing I'm missing a large portion of it. So just from knowing that, and then knowing the ADHD, which these two things I didn't know about until after in my middle 30s. So you can imagine growing up, if I knew, or my dad or the school knew about the ADHD and the other, and the corpus callosum stuff, we might have been able to catch it. There might be therapies, but we're at this point, we're at a part where we can't really attribute anything to the past, so we have to just go forward. So I guess coming full circle, the fact that I'm working in a place that I was a resident in, to me, is baffling. And I'm grateful for the opportunity, and it's helped me be the case manager, and it's helped me be the employee, and it's helped me be the coworker, that I am today.
Yeah. Do you think the ADHD and the corpus callosum?
Yep.
Okay. Um, do you think now, is there anything from the past that contributed to those, or was that so that was something that was underlying, right?
Yeah, so the agenesis, it's called agenesis of the corpus callosum, but when that happens, like in the birth, in the whole birth process. So that corpus callosum didn't form when I was being born, you know what I mean? And then the ADHD, and there's a couple other mental health diagnoses, but those I may be able to attribute to the struggles that my dad had.
Hmm.
Some of that stuff is kind of passed down, but he's not here, and he passed away in 2001. I got out of the military, and I went in 98, and I got out in 2000. So a lot of this is unknown, and that's been one of the hardest parts, I think, of trying to deal with this stuff, is that it's been like this for a long time. I feel like my past has attributed to the ADHD a lot, because there's relationship PTSD, there's and that's just not physical, or like love kind of connect relationships. That could be with just friendships, that could be with all these other coworker, employee, all that stuff. So I believe that the ADHD played a huge role in a lot of that. And then adding the stuff from my childhood, and even the military, and some of the choices and decisions that I made in that middle period, they all attributed it to it. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I was just I was looking for the dots to connect. Yeah, there was a couple times where you were blipping out, so that's why I pulled my video down to see if it would kind of clear up a little bit, and it did a little. It did somewhat. Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. The I wanted to kind of step back. You said that your father passed away in 2001, so
Yep.
it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
Um,
Over.
if I could ask you a personal question, and I ask it for a reason, because I think your answer would be beneficial to the listeners. Now that you know where you're at now, and helping other veterans in the transitional housing aspect, along with their finances, and getting them back into a place of normalcy, where you're at today, how do you see your father?
That's a
Yeah, I
loaded.
mean, where have you gone with the growth of your mind and your heart, and those events, because you are your own man now, and you are self-parenting yourself, you're taking care of yourself, and you are living to make Shaun a better veteran, and a better man. So if your dad was here today, what would you tell him?
Man. Um, Honestly, in the last year or so, there's been a lot of stuff that's come to light from my mom, and I understand why she was never around. I mean, there was probably not even 6 months from the time I was, little, to the time, maybe a year or so after my dad passed away, that we had got to spend together, because of the barriers that my dad put up. So knowing that, and knowing, you know, just how the life has gone, I kind of want to tell him that I understand that there's no book. I'm also a father to a 10-year-old, and so it even kind of hits a little bit harder for this, because now I'm looking at would I have put my daughter in those same situations that my dad put me in, and I think I would just say, like, I understand that there's no book, and I understand that you tried to do your best, but that wasn't it. you know
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
I've spent, from the time that he's passed away until present day, even up to hours ago today, unpacking all that stuff. And like as I said before, it's not in just in this last 4 years with therapy and understanding and being able to unravel this stuff and really work on it and have somebody who understands these things tell me, like, you're doing good, or like, you may think that you are looking at it from your perception, and I'm here telling you that you're doing these things and you're getting better, and I'm now to a point where I can say that, damn, I've put in a lot of work. I've sort of, I mean, in our profession, in our personal lives, we're always going to be works in progress. We're always going to have things to work on, and I think somebody who's in a better situation than I have still has those things, because without them we don't grow, and we don't inspire ourselves, let alone other people.
Hmm. I, I'm sure that the answer to this question will, it might be difficult, but I'll throw it out there. I can see that you are proud of yourself and that you have a level of self-respect. As of today, if your father was standing next to you, do you feel he would be proud of you?
Yeah, yeah, I really do, because, excuse my language, right? Funny, I said I broke the fucking cycle. It's I'm I don't treat my daughter this way. I think about things before they happen. Do I have anger and and all this other stuff? Do I have maybe some of the stuff that my dad had or exhibited, or the same mannerisms or emotions? I have to, because I got brought up in that environment. But the fact that I have been able to put my feet down and say that that's not happening, and because of my mental health, because of my background, because of the addiction, and just because of the way that I was brought up, I feel like that doubles over, and it helps me bring my daughter up in an environment that's healthy, supportive, and she knows how she's supposed to be treated, and so in that, I guess my dad would be proud. um if
Right
he
on.
could hear all the stuff that I've said about him or thought about him, I even think that he would still be proud, because everybody has their own struggles and their own everybody has their own shit, right? But you just get to this point where like you focus, and you just move forward. So I feel like, yeah, he would be proud.
Yeah, I think you would be as well. Um, it's our stories are very similar, and we've talked about this off air. There's a lot of parallels. I know my father left this world, and when he passed on, he took a lot of pain, a lot of guilt, and a lot of I wish I could have, or I wish I should have. And he should on himself, he could on himself, and I too broke that cycle and became a very different man than what he was. And to answer that question for myself, I believe my father is proud of me as well. I too, I broke that cycle and I did things that he could not make himself do, that he could not get to that point. So for me, I won't speak for you, but for me, I carry him with me on my journey and on my mission. And he still walks with me, and anything that I can accomplish, or anyone that I can help, he's getting credit for that as well. And so I'm kind of giving his life a little extra meaning, because I'm living a different life. and making life better for other people. And I'm sure your dad is seeing that. It's like, wow, look at my boy and look what he's done and look what he's doing for other people. And yeah, I'm sure he's cheering you on and saying, man, he could have taught me a lot of things if I would have listened to him. But that's kind of what we face, and but it's hard. Yeah, it's hard, but it's good to know that you believe in your heart that he'd be proud of you. I think he would be as well. I want to wrap up here. We got just a couple of minutes, and we're going to wrap up because we could go a lot longer, I know. But folks, we are going to have Shaun's links in the show notes, so you can connect with him, get a copy of his book, Boys Do Cry, and let's just kind of wrap up the episode with your opinion on the importance of veterans, men and women, okay, telling their story to no one other than themselves, but really reviewing and speaking aloud your past, your present, and your future, and really, owning it like you have done. How important do you think that is?
I think I'll flip the microphone around for a second, and I'll just say how who do you talk to most in your life? You have a wife, right?
Right.
And then you have family. But you're inside your head 24 hours a day.
I was going to say myself. Yeah.
Yeah, you're and obviously there was an obvious answer to that, but you're literally in your head 24 hours a day. And that's a dangerous and scary place to be sometime, and it's a rewarding and an amazing place to be sometime. And I think that when things happen, such as yours or mine, or the however many people are going to listen to this, the importance of being able to talk is huge. Not only because you heal, right? The more that you talk about things, the easier it is for you to heal, but you also touch other people in the same scenarios. And I learned that through the book, that the power of me basically being so vulnerable that there was no off button with my story, that there's been 5 or 6, maybe 10 instances of people that I have met or talked to through direct messages or social media, where the book hit them in a way that they were able to kind of pull themselves out of what they were in, or help kind of unravel some of the shit that they were going through. And that is the epitome of the power of telling your stories, because I spent all those years saying to myself, like, no one gives a shit about my story. Like, I was just some homeless drug addict who kind of pulled himself up by the bootstraps and did this. But as we've been talking about, there's so much to unpack in this story that, like, we could touch lives for another 3 hours if we wanted to. But that's the gratification that I get, is that being vulnerable helps other people realize that there's other humans out there that have gone through what they've gone through. And even though they might not 150% know what that person's going through, they've seen the shoes before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's what I think of telling, I guess, being truthful with yourself, number one, and then using your experiences to help other people so that it's easier for them to walk through that shit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My last question before we wrap up tonight for Shaun Coffey. We've been speaking with Shaun tonight. A lot of good information and an inspiring story. But my last question for you before we wrap up is, do you think it's possible to heal if you don't own your soul or your spirit, and if you don't put any ownership in your journey?
Listen, I think change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of making a change. I think that was Tony Robbins. It's a quote that I use all the time, and I stay true to that. And I think no, it's like anything. It's like if you want to get bigger, you eat. If you want to get smaller, you reduce. If you want to stay healthy, you go to the gym. These are all things that you have to do on a normal daily, or weekly basis to be able to get the results that you need. So I do think that you have to do the work. And when you do, amazing shit happens, and you heal, and you learn better ways to be. And the number one thing I think in my life in the last 5 years or so is just being better today than I was yesterday. Being, teaching my daughter, the same.
Right on. The if you want to heal, you need to attend to the wound. You need to give that wound attention. And most wounds do heal, but not if they're overlooked or they're ignored.
Listen, the healing is scary. It's hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of crying. It's a lot of healing. It's a lot of being in dark places. But the power of going through that also propels you to a place where you can now remember it, but you can leave it in the past. You know what I mean? So like you end up realizing that that stuff happened, knowing what's happening from it, but you learn how to heal and you learn how to move forward. And it may take a year, it may take 50 years, it may not ever go away, but as time goes on, when you keep working on it, it becomes less and less of an issue, and you start to spend that time that you would on that thing on other things that are going to propel you forward.
And I think that's how a lot of people that are so inspiring to the general population is because they live their pain, they work through it, and without that pain, without that struggle, it's virtually impossible to help anyone else move forward.
Yeah.
So that's it's a gift that you give yourself first, and then in turn pass it on to someone else.
You can't just start your healing journey and then 2 months jump on a stage and tell a whole bunch of people, because I guess you can, but that's how I thought that I could do it. Is like, okay, I'm halfway healed, and I realized like, whoa, I got a lot more work to do. So I kind of stepped back, and now I'm in a spot where the healing has happened, and obviously you heal every day, you heal different parts, you learn different things. So it's a progression, but I'm to the point where I've gone through, I think as you called it, like the muddy stuff, or the muddy water. Like I've been through enough of that, and I've walked through clean enough water for long enough that I now believe in my own power to talk about these things and be able to answer people's questions and kind of maybe see their situation from a different perspective, and in a way that they're able to kind of grasp it themselves and hold on to it and just take off.
Mm-hmm. Like walking through a muddy river and not knowing what's under your feet, and then walking through a clean river and noticing that you're walking on, beautiful river rock, and you can see some beautiful things that are underneath your feet. So it's definitely a clarity aspect. Wow. Shaun, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. And folks, you need to check out the show notes. Click on those links. Get a copy of Boys Do Cry. Reach out to Shaun on his social media links. Visit his website and connect with him. Like many of my guests on the Men on a Mission podcast, he is a servant. He's a giver. He's laughed, he's cried, he's struggled, he's been angry, he's been happy. And the biggest thing is he is still doing it today. And he wants what's best for you, which will also make him move on with, his heart and his life, and becoming an even stronger man and an even better father to his daughter. So we're going to wrap up. Thanks, Shaun, for being on the podcast, and we'll talk off air. I'm going to wrap up like I always do. This is episode 54. We've been talking with Shaun Coffey. He is an author, speaker, a childhood trauma survivor, and many, many more. things. So thanks again, Shaun. And I'll leave you with this. Love your little me and understand they need you more than you can imagine. So until next time, love yourself and take care. Bye for now.
First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cages loud and strong. For wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to